How to approach case study questions in an MBA interview. Questions which require you to solve a real-time problem. An example, the government is planning a new parking facility for the New Delhi International Airport. What should be the capacity of this parking? Before you look at an organized approach towards solving such problems, maybe you would want to just pause the video and try reaching a number for this question. The case study questions judge a candidate's aptitude for solving complex business problems. These are common in management job interviews, especially for consulting profiles. These questions are not very common in the pre-MBA interviews. However, they are sometimes asked by schools where consulting is a prominent post-MBA option, and especially from candidates who talk about consulting as a post-MBA career goal. An example is ISB. The school does ask case study based questions. So consider this preparation a prelude to your MBA job interview. Broad tips about solving the case study based questions. First of all, seek time from the interviewer. Break the problem into small parts while covering as many dimensions as possible. Assume sensible numbers. Important, emphasize on the process. It's not so much about the number you reach. The interviewer wants to see your aptitude and approach for solving complex business problems. An example, the same question. If you have not already solved it, please try solving it now. Remember the 2 steps. Break the problem while covering as many dimensions as possible. Assume reasonable numbers. We are breaking the problem now. We need to find the parking capacity. Let's start with the smallest element or the most logical element to begin with. There is no single correct way of solving these questions, but I thought in terms of beginning with the number of gates on the airport, thereafter flights per hour per gate, thereafter average operational hours per gate. Of course, a gate may not be operational all 24 hours in a day. Average number of passengers per flight. Remember the incoming passengers. In case you did not cover this aspect, there is a major flaw in your calculation. Passengers traveling in groups. Of course, one car may accommodate multiple people sometimes. Then percentage of travelers using the parking. Of course, a big chunk of travelers would not be using parking at all. And then airport employees, many of them may be using the parking as well. Average parking time per car, peak load capacity. There may be hours in the day when the averages will not apply and a higher capacity may be needed, maybe the morning hours or the evening hours. And margin for capacity expansion. While planning, we would want to have capacity for any marginal increase in the load handled by the airport. So now we have completed the first step, which was to break the problem. We broke this into good 10 parts or so, and now let's go about filling these parts with reasonable numbers. I would suggest that at this stage, please pause the video and fill in the numbers. This step will help you in identifying that how reasonable your estimates are. Number of gates. Delhi is a big city with high population. There should be an adequately high number of gates. A number like 10, 20, 30 would be too low. A number like, of course, 200, 300 would be very high. Those would be unreasonably low or high numbers. I have assumed a 50 kind of a number. Flights per hour per gate. Maybe from a gate, a flight takes off every 45 minutes or so. For simplicity, I have assumed it as 1. If you took it as 4, 5 kind of a number, that would be an unreasonable estimate, I would say. Average operational hours per gate. Maybe a good 16, 18, 20 kind of a number makes sense. I have taken 18 here. Average number of passengers per flight. The number may vary from anywhere between 100 to 400 and above. But also remember the load factor. Not all the flights are going to be totally full, and therefore the average should be a bit on the lower side. I have taken 200. If you took this number as 500 or so, that would be an unreasonable estimate. If you took it as 100 or so, that would also be too low an estimate. Something above 100 and something below 300, 350 would be considered a reasonable estimate. Incoming passengers. Before we do this, let us find the total number of passengers so far. 50 number of gates, 1 flight per hour, 18 hours per day, and then 200 passengers per flight. Keep rounding off these numbers. Don't deal with complex numbers. Always keep rounding these off. This gives me a number of 200,000. Incoming passengers should practically be very close to the number of outgoing passengers. So another 200,000. 400,000 is the total number so far. We are assuming that 400,000 users are using the airport every day. Passengers traveling in groups, I have assumed it as 40%. What effect will it have on the parking capacity? Should 400,000 be multiplied by 0.6? That would not be correct. Remember, 40% people, if it is a group of 3 individuals on average, still they contribute to 13.33%. So just removing 40% would not be a good idea. That would be an incorrect calculation. So let's assume that these 40% individuals lead to a 20% decrease in the units of passengers using the parking, and therefore my base of 400,000 becomes 320,000. Now the most important part probably, that what percentage of travelers as well as their co-visitors will be using the parking. The number should be a low number. Airport parkings are very costly and most of the people end up taking cabs. 10% to 20% seems to be a reasonable estimate. 20% seems to be quite on the higher side. I have assumed 15%, and therefore these 320,000 units of passengers contribute to 48,000 cars being parked in the parking lot every day. Should 48,000 be the answer? Not at all. There are many other factors to be considered. Airport employees, what number comes to your mind? A rough estimate is that it should be a few thousand, maybe a 2,000 kind of a number. Most of these employees will not be using the parking as they would have other arrangements. So this will not have a very significant impact considering 48,000 is the number that we are at so far. This particular aspect does not have a very serious impact. So let us just round it off to a 50,000 kind of a number, suggesting that in a day 50,000 cars are to be parked at the airport. Average parking time per car, roughly 1 hour. Some of them would be much lower, but some of them would be day long, 2 day, 3 days long parkings. So 1 hour kind of a number seems reasonable. If you took 30 minutes, that's also all right. If you took lower than that, that would not be reasonable. If you took a very high number such as 3 hours or more, that would also not be a reasonable number. So the 50,000 number we are at has to be spread over the entire day. One parking session is of 1 hour. In 24 hours, we can have 24 sessions, and therefore at any point in time, the number we reach out to is 50,000 upon 24, roughly 2,000. But this number is a very conservative number. Imagine the number would be much lower during late nights and it would be much higher during the peak traffic hours. Further, imagine there are going to be times in the year during the festive season and all where the load factor will be a lot higher, and this assumption of 200 passengers per flight may change. Remember, while building capacity, we do not have to look at the average. We have to look for the peak capacity. The airport should never run short of parking slots, and therefore the peak load capacity would be a lot higher than the average capacity we have come up to. I have assumed 100% extra capacity. If you thought a 20% kind of a number, that would be an unreasonable number. If you thought of a 400, 350% kind of a number, that would also be an unreasonably high number. So the 2000 number we are at should be doubled. It becomes 4000. Margin for capacity expansion, this should not be very high. A reasonable 10, 20, 30% kind of a number makes sense, and therefore 4000 into 1.2, 4800 is the number we arrive at. In case you disagree with any of these numbers, please don't be mad at me. The purpose of this video is more about telling you the approach. It's not about the numbers so much. Many of these numbers may not practically be correct. I have applied general wisdom in assuming these numbers. And this made me curious to figure out the number. It took me some time to find a number. The number is 4300. So we may have done a reasonable job. But again, it's not about the number so much. It is about the approach. A quick recap. Seek time from the interviewer. Break the problem into small parts covering as many dimensions as possible. Assume reasonable numbers. Overall, emphasize on process. It's about the approach because the interviewer wants to see your aptitude for solving complex management problems. So that was the concept, guys. To get complete grasp over your MBA interview preparation, please watch all the 15+ videos in this series. Thanks for watching.